Hi guys, Vicious Cosplay here. Had a long discussion with a cosplay buddy of mine. We were talking about the cosplay does not equal consent, and the cosplay is a choice, not an entitlement discussion that's been floating around. And in that discussion, there were a few things that we realized between the two of us, as well as through the things we've read and the things we've interacted with. The first big problem with this entire ordeal with the cosplay does not equal consent movement is the pure fact that it went viral. That alone is a major inflicting factor. The moment anything goes viral, the moment anything gets popular, the initial message is, of course, completely deteriorated. Consider it almost like a whisper down the lane. This is a rant video. It's not like one of my more normal rant videos. I do not plan on being funny, so this should be an eye-opener to some of my cosplay fans who have never seen me serious face. So, here we go. Though this might be considered common sense to most people, the cosplay does not equal consent movement was an awareness movement. It wasn't meant to make any drastic social changes, maybe small ones, but definitely not anything huge. It was coming to the attention of people who are not in the cosplay circuit, but still in the convention circuit, that cosplayers were having problems, and the problems were growing as time went on. The more popular the conventions come, the more outsiders interact with us, the more that happens. So initially, when the first articles were starting to go really viral, the first thing that I noticed was all of my staff emails from the conventions I staff at were starting to explode with questions on if we need to do panels on this sort of thing, or if security needs to vamp up, or something else. So it was really making other people aware that this was an issue, and that was the aim of the movement first place. Again, this was another outcry by a community that is primarily silent and facing these issues with it, mostly within itself. But it was also to show that the community was willing to stand with each other, which is something that the people who were being harassed, who didn't know how to stand up for themselves, desperately needed. Many of the issues that I've seen with harassment that is went unnoticed is simply because the person who was being harassed usually didn't vocalize it or give off any signals at all. Usually they didn't feel brave enough to do it, or possibly because they didn't think anybody would help. This is actually not very uncommon in outside communities as well. We suffer terribly from the bystander effect, so it's that assumption that someone else will step in to fix the problem, but not really participate themselves, or waiting for someone else to be the superhero. We get this mentality put into our heads, and then when we're in a situation, suddenly we think to ourselves, who's going to help me? Or even worse, who's going to believe me? So people talking about this and people bringing it up suddenly was bringing up this mentality, oh, people will stand up for me, and that's awesome. Although the loudest voices in the debate tend to be the people talking about sexual harassment with a lack or different types of sexy costumes, it's not actually reserved to that, and that's being pushed aside very quickly. The amount of clothing or the tightness it adds to the body does not matter when it comes to being sexually harassed, or harassed at all. Myself in Summoner, the first time I wore it, I got groped. This is a black dress that has hands and some cleavage, some in comparison to the rest that I have, very little cleavage, and yet I was manhandled from behind when I was signing my badge. My buddy Zetra Guild, when I was speaking to her about it, said it doesn't really matter what type of clothing you're wearing, it's the opportunity that presents itself. And at the same time, it's not reserved to females, but also a large amount of males who have been crotch grabbed, nipple pinched, and sadly in the case of fanservice Renji, and if you haven't watched his video yet, you should, he was drugged at a hotel party by a fan of his with a date rape drug. The harassment also isn't just sexual. The harassment never stops there. Cosplayers from extra small to extra large are hit with all sorts of fat shaming, both in person and on the internet. Cosplayers deal with the post holy shit you're a girl dude mentality, and then suddenly hit with all sorts of homophobic and other derogatory metaphors. Mascot or masked cosplayers can face congoers pranking them or mocking them because they're in this limited costume, and therefore there's no backlash that they can give to these people who are being douchebags. A lighter skinned cosplayer doing a darker skinned cosplay will most likely get hit with racism in terms of whitewashing and brown facing, while a darker skinned cosplayer in a lighter skinned or even a cosplay of their skin type will get hit with all sorts of racism from the back end, which can sometimes be even worse. There are several people I've heard that it's not uncommon for them to hear this cosplayer would be so much better if the person wasn't black. An example is Kamikaze Miko, who upon getting her Summoner Showcase for her Karma for League of Legends, who is a darker skinned character, was immediately hit with intense racist fan mail and racist commentary from it. And let us not forget the scariest one of all, the fandom hatred. I have heard death threats, physical threats, and all sorts of terrible remarks against people of other fandoms. Remember that harassment is not limited to the amount of clothing you're wearing. Anyone will find any reason to be a dick to you. One of the biggest downsides I've seen to this is a lot of people are saying that you need to tell everything to convention security. And this can include candid photos, simple misogynistic outbursts, or even plain old awkward behavior. If everyone tells security about their issue all the time, they wouldn't have time to actually handle the bigger issues. Best rule of thumb, if your situation does not warrant a call to 911, or if you feel you need an officer involved, it is not worth bugging convention security about. So catcalling, candid photos, or awkward behavior is something that needs to be handled by you, your friends, and possibly by bystanders who will gladly stand beside you. Getting a security or staff member involved might not actually result in anything. You're wasting two people's times, theirs and yours. So what is a good bug for security? If someone physically touches you and goes as far as to try to get under your clothing or remove your clothing, you should definitely scream to make sure that everybody in your area has a chance to at least try and capture a snapshot of this person before they run. If a cameraman gets caught taking blunt photos, like such as panty shots, for example, cell phones under the skirt, or shoe cameras, I've seen one. These are the people that should be reported. A guy taking candid photos that might be for wank material is far too much of a might. If someone makes you feel physically threatened, aka verbally or in stature threatens you with physical harm, you should not only immediately call for the closest help, but you should also make sure you have people around you to help if a situation like that does break out. A creeper who is awkward, but probably harmless. A creeper who grabs you is a problem. However, though, if you are treated inappropriately in any way, such as sexual harassment, grabbed inappropriately, spoken to inappropriately, or, any sort of harassment, be it sexual, racial, fat shaming, blah, that is done by a staff member or a press member, should be reported immediately to higher security members, not just base security. Go as far up as you can. These people help represent the convention, and the chairs and the vice chairs and the leads of the convention most certainly do not want people who are harassing congoers, paying congoers, to represent their convention, and they do not want to give them free room and board as well. So always make sure that if you are harassed by any sort of person wearing a staff or a press badge, you talk to security then. Sadly, this is not all uncommon in our Western culture anymore, as we've seen with the Steubenville victims lately. Victim blaming is very common in our culture. It's extremely common. Wearing a particular type of costume does mean that you're probably going to get more attention for XYZ. Expecting it is a good thing. However, it doesn't mean that it has to be dealt with. It's like telling a girl when she goes out to a party that she should not wear a miniskirt or not drink because she's probably going to get raped, and that if she's not expecting it, she's a moron. What you're doing there is that you are saying that the victim is responsible for making sure that a perpetrator committing a crime doesn't have the opportunity to commit a crime. This is why the cosplay does not equal consent movement at its infancy was a really good idea, because it actually is a prime example of standing up for the fundamental principle that rape culture is bad. And victim blaming is a terrible thing, and the blame should be placed on the perpetrators, not the victim. Now, this is the most fundamental thing I wanted to point out in this entire argument, because I see this being missed from every side, and I felt the need to address it. One of the biggest arguments either for or against cosplay does not equal consent or everything is the idea that saying no is easy. But for some people, it isn't easy at all. And it's simply because they do not operate socially in the same way that the poster does. Some people do not have the willpower or the strength or the reasoning to pull themselves away from a creepy photographer, or they don't know how to blow off and keep away from sexist commentary, or they don't know how to react when someone touches their ass or their breasts. You know, there's a lot of people who go through this mode where they need to please the person in front of them, and by saying no, it's displeasure, and suddenly they're in this issue where they're like, I don't know what to do. For me, it seems really easy to go look at someone who's being an asshole and go fuck yourself, you pretentious cunt. That's really easy for me. It's no problem. For some, it is a problem. One of my first Otakons, as some of you have already known, I pulled a Sailor Mercury away from a creepy photo shoot on one of the sidewalls between the convention centers. She looked extremely awkward. She looked really uncomfortable. And I instantly was like, this isn't good. So I rushed up to her and went, we need to fucking go. We're late for the masquerade. And she came right off the wall and went, oh my god, I lost time. I'm sorry, I need to go. And we rushed all the way to the first security booth that we could find so that she could just feel safe. Now, how she got herself into that situation, I don't know. Why she couldn't get herself out of it in the first place, I don't get. But of course, she has a different view. She's different socially. It's her reactions. I don't understand it, but that's the way she works, and that's the way some people work. And it's why bullying exists, because if there are some people who don't know what to do, they're more likely to get picked on, and the event will repeat itself because they are unsure of how to handle the situation, and therefore come up with the ideal that trudging through it and it will be over soon is the better mentality. This is why cosplay does not equal consent was a really great movement and ideal for it, because it lets those people who do not have that strength to say no, that there are people like me who will gladly run up and get you the fuck out of Dodge. You have that assurance. If you feel awkward and you are able to give out any sort of SOS to a nearby person, be it a glance, be it a worm, be it a scream, suddenly you have their attention, they pick up what's going on, and they will get you out. So this is all I wanted to share about this topic, because there are many views and many mixed messages that seem to be going around about this. It's always lost in the viral production. I hope it gives a different views to my followers and anybody who picks this up. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to finish my dinner. Night, guys.